The global energy market is facing a test unlike any in recent memory, revealing just how delicate and interconnected supply chains have become. One of the most important shipping lanes in the world, long considered a reliable artery for energy exports, has suddenly fallen silent. Tankers in the Gulf are no longer moving, and countries that depend on Middle Eastern oil are now scrambling to secure fuel before shortages force emergency measures. This sudden disruption has cast a spotlight on a nation that had anticipated the need for secure alternative energy routes long before the crisis erupted. Canada now finds itself in a rare and powerful position. It controls one of the few large-scale energy supplies that is completely insulated from the turmoil, and the consequences of this advantage are already being felt in fuel prices across the United States and beyond. The Strait of Hormuz has historically been a vital choke point in the global energy system, linking the Persian Gulf with the wider world and serving as the main passage for crude oil and liquefied natural gas leaving the region. On a typical day, approximately one-fifth of the world's oil moves through this narrow waterway, with roughly 100 tankers navigating its tight channels to deliver energy to Asia, Europe, and North America. Yet, when political tensions around Iran escalated and military threats grew, this critical corridor effectively froze. Shipping companies pulled their vessels from the area, insurance coverage evaporated almost overnight, and heightened naval activity pushed commercial traffic out of the Gulf entirely. A route once brimming with activity transformed into a near-ghost zone, leaving massive shipments of crude oil trapped with nowhere to go. According to maritime records from Lloyd's List, around 200 tankers are now stranded within the Strait of Hormuz and surrounding Gulf waters. Thousands of seafarers are caught in a dangerous limbo, waiting for an outcome no one can predict. Some vessels remain anchored near the coast of Dubai, others are scattered throughout the Gulf, and each represents millions of barrels of crude that cannot reach global markets. One crew member recounted the surreal experience of trying to operate a tanker in this environment. Initially, orders came to halt loading when explosions illuminated the sky in the distance. Hours later, despite the continuing chaos, they were instructed to resume. The vessel ultimately carried over 1 million barrels of crude while communication systems failed, GPS signals disappeared, and military jets roared overhead. Today, the ship remains stationary, with a crew that includes workers from India, the Philippines, and other countries, sending occasional updates to employers and family members while hoping the violence never comes too close. Inside the vessel, life continues in a tense blend of routine and fear. Explosions sometimes light the night sky, fighter jets streak overhead, and yet the crew must maintain operations under surreal conditions. With limited internet and disrupted satellite signals, even brief communication with family can be difficult, forcing reliance on quick, intermittent messages to reassure loved ones. The tanker carries enough food and desalinated water to sustain the crew for roughly 60 days, but any prolonged shutdown could make rationing necessary. International maritime unions are already inundated with urgent requests for assistance from trapped sailors, raising difficult questions about evacuation or crew replacement. Stephen Cotton, General Secretary of the International Transport Workers Federation, notes that seafarers are often overlooked during geopolitical crises, despite their essential role in maintaining global trade. Repatriating crew members safely is a complex logistical challenge. Ship owners have warned that the surrounding waters are effectively a no-go zone, and replacing personnel in an active conflict would require individuals willing to risk life and limb just to board a tanker. Reports indicate that at least 6 vessels have already been attacked in the area, with 2 seafarers killed and a major explosion near Kuwait impacting an oil tanker earlier this week. Each new incident compounds uncertainty and dissuades shipping companies from attempting passage. Marine insurers have reacted by dramatically increasing premiums or withdrawing coverage entirely, making operations in the Gulf financially prohibitive, even for those prepared to accept high risk. The ramifications of such a disruption extend far beyond the Gulf. The global oil market depends on continuous, reliable movement from production fields to refineries. When a single corridor, responsible for 1/5 of global energy, stops functioning, prices spike rapidly, and countries begin frantically searching for alternative supplies. Millions of barrels remain trapped on tankers, unable to leave the region, forcing governments and energy companies to act quickly to prevent cascading shortages. In the midst of this crisis, Canada has emerged as a rare source of stability. Its energy exports flow through pipelines and coastal terminals far from the Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea, ensuring that shipments continue even as Middle Eastern routes collapse. A major pipeline running from Alberta's oil sands to the Pacific coast now transports approximately 890,000 barrels of crude daily, where tankers can head west across the Pacific toward Asian markets. The journey from Canada to Asia takes around 10 days, about half the time required for traditional shipments from the Middle East when the strait is operational. In a moment when Gulf routes have become unusable, countries are suddenly aware that a large, stable supplier exists thousands of miles away in North America. Canada's energy reserves further strengthen its position, with 163 billion barrels of proven crude, ranking fourth globally behind Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and production nearing 6 million barrels per day, including output from the massive Alberta oil sands. The country can meet substantial portions of global demand without relying on vulnerable routes. Its liquefied natural gas infrastructure adds another layer of influence. A major terminal in British Columbia is capable of supporting roughly 170 tanker shipments per year, and countries such as South Korea already depend on these exports, bypassing the instability of Middle Eastern supply chains entirely. This combination of resources and infrastructure has transformed Canada from a regional supplier into a dependable global player, capable of filling gaps whenever disruptions occur elsewhere. For decades, the vast majority of Canadian oil flowed south into the United States, keeping domestic prices significantly below global benchmarks. Crude would often sell for $40 to $60 less per barrel than international prices, a situation that benefited American refineries but left Canadian producers with limited leverage. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has changed the dynamics entirely. As global oil prices climb, Canadian crude gains strategic value, recognized by buyers across Europe and Asia who now see Canada as a secure alternative. The current crisis has ignited demand from countries that rarely purchased Canadian energy before. India, importing roughly 90% of its oil and maintaining minimal reserves, faces urgent pressure to secure rapid deliveries. Japan, similarly reliant on maritime imports, and South Korea, with long-term LNG commitments, are also re-evaluating supply chains. European nations, increasingly cautious after reducing dependence on Russian gas, are watching closely. Canada, with its diverse portfolio of oil, natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and uranium, and the infrastructure to deliver these resources safely, stands in a uniquely strong position during this period of global instability. Investments such as the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline have nearly tripled Canada's capacity to export oil to the Pacific, while LNG Canada, a $40 billion facility in northern British Columbia, has opened a direct export gateway for liquefied natural gas across the Pacific. Alberta's oil sands support more than 150,000 direct jobs and hundreds of thousands more indirectly, boosting provincial economies as higher energy prices drive reinvestment and growth. Where once Canadian producers had almost no choice but to sell primarily to the U.S., they now have global reach and leverage, capable of stepping in when other supply lines falter. Long-term agreements, including India's uranium deal and ongoing LNG shipments to Asia, reinforce Canada's reputation as a stable supplier outside the volatile Middle Eastern corridors. As the world watches the Gulf crisis unfold, countries increasingly recognize the value of a supplier that can deliver energy without navigating contested waters. Canada, with its combination of abundant resources, secure infrastructure, and established international partnerships, has become an indispensable stabilizer in a time when global energy supply lines feel more fragile than ever.